A blessed evening, everyone. To all those gathered at the what we call extramural department of the University of the West Indies. Now it's called Open Campus. But in the days when Irving and I attended under the illustrious, now deceased, K. Polidor, it was the extramural department. So to all of you, a blessed evening, a blessed good evening, and to high officials and those not too high, and to the working classes, and to those who are interested in literature, in history, and the best interests of our country, I bid you welcome. Well, my name's Gabriel Christian, and I've been associated with the Right Honorable Justice Irving Andre for many years. Time takes me back to 1975-76, where I'm at the Dominica Grammar School, somewhere in second, third form, and I'm at the research section, and here's an upperclassman. In those days, there was not much of an interaction between upperclassmen, and there were very few ladies at the grammar school then, and those in the lower form. And Irving, Judge Andre was ahead of me, and we would close the library. We would stay in the library until closing time on a Saturday afternoon. So this book, which has been launched this evening, The Mantle of Struggle, a biography of Black revolutionary Rosie Douglas by Irving Andre, has its genesis in studied effort and voluntary service. The studied effort that I saw Irving engaged in was an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. He had this passion and desire for knowledge, and I was fortunate in that time to have made friends with him. And so when in 1976, Rosie Douglas was deported from Canada for his role in the 1969 Sir George William University uprising, and formed the Popular Independence Committee to support the then Labour Party of Patrick John in the march towards political independence, which was not quite popular for a lot of reasons because of the mistakes that had been made by Patrick John during the Dread Act and the Dread War and the passing of the notorious Prohibited and Unlawful Societies Act, aka the Dread Act. Meant a lot of young people in the urban center of Roseau were not very fond of the government, because a lot of young people had been brutalized, their dreadlocks had been cut, and this year is 50 years since that infamous act was passed. So when Rosie Douglas came, he brought wind to the sails of the Labour Party, which was floundering among the youth population, which inexorably, because again of mistakes, led to 1979 and the change of government then. But when Rosie came back, his brother Michael Douglas was in government, and he took the position that we should support the government on independence, and he formed the Popular Independence Committee. And I joined the committee and became the secretary because I had a penchant for being a diarist. I always took notes. And so Rosie says, let Gabriel be the secretary because he always is writing. And I recruited Irving to the cadre, and we were the most dynamic, youth-led, student-led entity of the Popular Independence Committee in Roseau. And we'd have debates, we'd have panel discussions at the parish hall, at St. George's Hall, at the schools. And at the same time, I was the president of the Federation of Students, which grouped the students in Roseau and the one secondary school outside Roseau, Portsmouth Secondary School, where we had people like Debbie Douglas, Alec Lawrence, Angus Olad, Romanas, Romanus' name will get to me in a while. Steve John and people like that. But I want to say, before I talk about what animated Irving and what made him a leader then of studied effort and voluntary service, because when we put out, for instance, the magazine of Cadre #1, which is what we call ourselves on the inside, and on the outside, we call ourselves the Cicero Youth Movement. We call it Vanguard, the voice of the working people. Although in those days, we were not working people. We were teenagers at our parents' homes. Irving, of course, lived with his parents in Goodwill, and I lived with my parents in Lower Goodwill. So we weren't working people, we were students. But before I go into that any further, I want to give thanks to the University Center's director, Ms. Joseph, for always being a friend of the arts and to opening the doors of the University Center to Pontcasse Press, and myself, Irving, and others who are desirous of exposing the best of our people through literature, history, and the like. I want to give thanks to our parents. Irving's parents did a fantastic job with himself and his brothers and sisters. And his mom, who's still here, his beloved mom, who's still here, nurtured a good son and his father before he left us. I want to give thanks to Irving's wife in particular, Kathy. Her father was a fantastic historian in his own right, World War II veteran, Twistleton Bertrand, and a mother who just left us, may her soul rest in peace, Dolly. She also provided Irving, both of them, Twist and his wife, with a fine specimen of a person in Kathy. And without, I think Irving will be honest in saying, without Kathy's presence, he would not have maybe been as successful a writer as he is. Kathy has been the guiding light in many respects in helping Irving be so productive in authoring more than 20 books on Dominican history, literature, biography, and the like. I want to give thanks to our teachers. Several come to mind. Our principal back then, Kay Polidor, of blessed memory, who was the Sixth Form College or Call principal. People like Dorothy Levy, Alwyn Bully, Herbert Volney, Hubert Charles, Ma Pemberton, Lady Macaram, Josephine Josephs, all of those persons who, and many others, who, again, with great passion, with great dedication to education, provided us with an exceptional education. Our teachers in that period were exceptional teachers. So too were our doctors and our nurses at the then Princess Margaret Hospital, where people would live from other islands on occasion and come to Dominica to have medical procedures. So God bless them. Because of that, we had a solid education system in Dominica, and we had a solid healthcare system in Dominica that was the envy of some of our many of our neighbors. We give thanks for that kind of enabling environment, because without good health, without good education, there'd be no Irving Andre, and there would be no Pontcasse Press. There'd be no publication of this kind. This would be but a dream. And so, as I salute our parents and all they did for us, our brothers and sisters, all they did for us, in particular Irving's brothers and sisters who provided an enabling environment, I want to take a moment for Dominicans to understand what is required for us to succeed as a nation. The book Irving will discuss in detail. You will ask questions, and I'm sure you'll buy copies of it. But I believe it's important to understand, for those of us who are overseas, who love our country, like Irving has been a good exemplar of what is a nation builder. He's not simply been an outstanding student back in the 1980s, at late 1970s, early 80s at the University of West Indies, Jamaica, Mona, Jamaica, where he graduated with honors. He was not only a good student at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, where in the 1980s he would come down to Washington and meet me, and we would go up to Capitol Hill to the Library of Congress. Many afternoons, going through the stacks and unearthing the history of our island, which had been consigned to oblivion, the dark moors of oblivion, because of the inattention of a colonial society to the narrative of a vanquished people. Our African descendants, or Kalinago descendants, had been vanquished. And to the victor goes the spoils. And so the history we were told of was the history of Europe, Britain in particular. Very little history on Dominica. And so throughout the period when we were members of the Popular Independence Committee, striving to build an independent nation for which we would have all due pride, because we believed in each other, we respected each other, we loved each other, we loved our country, we were dutiful to our country. We did not lie, cheat, or steal. We believed that with a new republic that was resonant in way of integrity in office, competent in the execution of the civil service and the police service and foreign affairs, we would have our people at what is called the commanding heights. And that is what Rosie really spoke to. Rosie spoke to our pride as a people. She wanted us to have an independent nation, not a nation that was sold out to a plague of passport peddlers who saw nothing worthy of pride in our citizenship, so they could treat it as a commodity to be bought and sold on the international market without any accounting to the people who they claimed to represent. So Rosie Douglas represented something that is worthy of emulation in way of his service. He was the son of a wealthy family, maybe one of the most wealthy families at the time. And when he went to Canada in 1961, Rosie Douglas could have remained with the Conservatives, who were his benefactors. Prime Minister Diefenbaker, who was a conservative, had invited Rosie to Canada, and he was a leading light, maybe the most prominent Black student in the Conservative Party of Canada. Rosie Douglas was. But by 1964-65, when he arranged for the visit to Canada of the Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosie Douglas, he moved to the side of civil rights and the Black consciousness and the whole idea of the countries of the South, those like in the Caribbean, Dominica and the others, countries in Africa, and the First Nations, that is the indigenous people in Canada, being given their right to self-determination, to pride in their culture, pride in their heritage, and opportunities within the framework of an equality of opportunity society. So Rosie volunteered. He studied at Guelph Agricultural University, went on to McGill, and made common cause with the students at what is now Concordia University, but then Sir George Williams University. And after he had engaged in study effort, he volunteered to lead the civil rights movement. For that, he was imprisoned. For that, he suffered. For that, he sacrificed. So when we met him as teenagers in Dominica, we were children in our parents' homes. Rosie didn't have any cool out to give to us. First thing the only thing Rosie ever gave me of material kind was the book Common Sense by Thomas Paine, one of the pamphleteers and revolutionaries of the American independence movement that led to the breaking away of the 13 colonies from what is then the United Kingdom. Rosie was always focused on education. He always wanted to know we, for instance, were engaged in studied effort. We kept notes, we kept minutes, we learned how to move a motion, how to move a vote of thanks, and we're 13, 14, 15 years old. And we're discussing issues of our Constitution and how we would run our agriculture and how we would do things like geothermal and solar back in the 1970s. And not once it ever occurred to us that our nationality would be pulverized by the wanton and reckless sale of our nationality as in passports. Throughout that time, Irving is in Canada. Like with Rosie, apart from going to school, getting married to Kathy, having a family, he dedicated himself to the Dominican community in Canada and became a leader in that community, became a confidant, a counselor, a supporter. Whenever there would be a disaster, Irving would be there. So the effort that Irving has made in literature has been mirrored in his effort in community development. Likewise, we have here all our samples. We have our flag by our beloved teacher, Alvin Bully. We have the guava, preserve, juice from Bello, the pepper sauce from Bello, the marmalade, the bay rum, the other pepper sauce, the passion fruit jam, all of those things that we imported into the United States to help preserve, promote our agro-industry. A lot of it is now gone, a lot of which Irving will tell you in this book, Rosie was dedicated to promoting through organizations like NDAP, the Northern District Agricultural Processing Cooperative. And so I will close with this. To those of you who will be listening to Irving this evening, to those of you who will buy this book, understand that the culture we need to change is not simply one of a political culture of unethical behavior in office. The culture we need to also abide is where we do things, we do it based on studied effort. We need to study literature, or English, or chemistry, or botany, or physics, or mathematics, so we can be competent and competitive in this world. And we've been fortunate to have good teachers to do so. But once we've engaged studied effort, we must not be greedy and unethical. We must not lie, cheat, and steal from our nation and from our community. Indeed, we must volunteer our time to share the benefits of that knowledge with hers. That is what Rosie Douglas did. I remember in the night that the courthouse was burnt, I was getting ready for my sixth form college exams in European history. It was a Saturday night. Rosie is in turmoil, the courthouse is in flames, people are milling about in the streets. May 29th, it happened a week or so before, and I said to Rosie, Rosie, the exam is Monday. I don't think I can take that exam. I'm in 6A at the same extramural department of the University of West Indies where we, at sixth form in those days, would stay because we had no building. We would use the convent library, we would use the grammar school labs, we would be at Seafolk Hall, located at the extramural department, primarily because we had no facility. Rosie was driving his Ford F-150 down to Portsmouth, and he said, look, Gabriel, if you don't take the exam on Monday, when are you going to take it? So in this moment of national crisis, where I'm looking to maybe forego an exam because of the national disorder of an uprising, Rosie was focused on my education. He said, you have got to take the exam. I took the exam and I got the best grade in history, maybe 6 years at the sixth form college. There's a man focused on education. He was also very kind. And I'll conclude by telling a story that speaks to his empathy, his compassion, his kindness, his lack of interest in the material trappings of power. So Rosie had come back from Canada in 1976, and Rosie oversaw the first trip to Cuba by Dominican students for the 11th World Festival of Youth and Students. I remember some people. The delegation's leader was National Youth Council President Pierre Charles. I was president of the Federation of Students. There's Debbie Douglas. There's Dr. Steve John at the Bureau of Standards. There's a gentleman, Alexis, from VACARS. There's a guy, Daru, from La Plaine. There's a gentleman, the Henry family from Maho. There's Agnes Esprit. She was one of the two females. The other one was Debbie Douglas. So I'd had a suede boots, and it had been, it had opened up a little bit, was laughing in the front, and I didn't have a chance to go to the shoemaker that day. And Rosie said, you can't go to Cuba in a pair of shoes like that. He went to his vehicle. He got a pretty much almost brand new pair of Clark's boots, very strong boots. He says, Gabriel, take these boots. When you get to Cuba and your shoes are fixed, give those to Steve John so he can bring them back to me at Portsmouth. And when Rosie came to the United States as Prime Minister in 2000, I took him to get a new pair of shoes and everything else, almost in memory of his kindness to me. 1 month later, after March 2000, I met him in May, a couple months later, rather, he had the same shoe. It was not a bad shoe, but I didn't see the shoes I bought him. I said, Rosie, where are the shoes? Rosie said, Gabe, I'm an old cadet. Shoe couldn't take shine. Turns out, Rosie had given the shoe away to someone who didn't have as fine a pair for a wedding. Rosie had zero interest in the material trappings of power. Can we say the same now about those who lead our country or mislead our country? And so I urge all of you to get this book. I urge all of you to give support to the arts. I urge all the students to engage in studied effort, to volunteer in your community. Volunteering means you don't wait for a cool out. Volunteering means when you have a hurricane, you help your neighbor. Volunteering means that you help your teachers to keep order in the class and in the schools. Volunteering means that you give to worthy causes. Volunteering means that you help build a beloved community, and that you are a sharing person, that you're a kind person, that you understand to volunteer makes you overall a better person. And so to Dominicans at home and abroad, I ask you this one question. Do you believe that we can have a better society simply because we change the government? No. We'll only have a better society, and I believe Rosie would stand for that proposition, where we take on the attributes that Irving Andre has exemplified, has made manifest in himself. Somewhere I read, first let us become the change that we desire to see. And indeed, Judge Andre, through his prodigious effort in the arts, as a community leader, as a judge who's stretched himself to volunteer for organizations like the Nature Island Civil Liberties Foundation, the organizations in Canada which have been very helpful to Dominica at times of disaster. He is shown in his attributes, his characteristics, the true attributes of leadership. Leadership that's kind, that's wise, that's committed, and dedicated to the proposition that Dominicans are great people. We just have to do better in shaping a culture rooted in study, rooted in the principles of Kudme, and that is cooperative self-help. All of that premised on volunteerism. Let us volunteer to build a better Dominica. Let us volunteer to write our stories and to be studied about it. And let us give thanks to God for Irving Andre and his efforts to keep alive the memory of our great leader, Rosie Douglas, and other leaders who have made meaningful contributions to the onward march of our civilization. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. God bless all of you. God bless you, Irving. And God bless Dominica. Thank you very much.